The iconic Predator is back on the hunt, but this time he's the hero in a family-friendly film. Predator Badlands is not the type of film I think many people are probably expecting. The question is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I have seen it, so let's talk about it. As some of you know by now, I'm a big fan of the Alien franchise, but I've never been, a huge fan of the Predator films. The 1986 original film starring the one and only Arnold Schwarzenegger is a cult classic in the sci-fi genre, and a film that I like a fair amount. But the series has mostly been forgettable since then. At least until director Dan Trachtenberg kind of revitalized the franchise in 2022 with Prey, which is arguably the best film in the series. And I really loved that film. But sadly, it kind of flew under the radar due to the pandemic and a straight-to-streaming release. So I was excited for Trachtenberg to return once again and just have his chance to put his ambitious vision onto the big screen, even if I didn't quite end up liking this as much as I had hoped. With an uneven tone and a surprisingly tame story, Predator Badlands may not be better than previous films in the series, but it is certainly bigger, delivering an entertaining, action-packed sci-fi spectacle that I do think lots of people will enjoy, even if I don't think it ever really feels like a Predator movie. As some of you guys probably know, the Predator and the Alien franchises exist in the same shared universe, which is a connection very much front and center with this film. Yet, while last year's Alien Romulus sought to sort of revitalize the franchise with a very back-to-its-roots approach, Trachtenberg has been doing really the exact opposite, taking increasingly bold, creative swings to subvert audience expectations. Prey distinguished itself by setting the action back in the 1700s instead of in the future, and now Predator Badlands flips the script once again, telling the story from the perspective of the Predator, I think turning one of cinema's most iconic villains into a sympathetic protagonist is a very risky decision, and I think the results are somewhat mixed. Whereas the earlier entries in the series capitalized on more intimate and contained settings, Badlands takes a bigger is better approach with very over-the-top action, a very vast scope and sweeping imagery, and the visuals of the alien planet are some of the most impressive put on screen in recent years, outside of James Cameron's Avatar movies. It all looks spectacular, even if I think the actual world building is a bit disjointed and just never feels as cohesive as Avatar's Pandora. But this is a film clearly intended to be experienced on the big screen. Now, here's where things start to get a little more interesting, because I think for better or worse, this is easily the most sort of widely accessible film in the franchise. The established horror roots are entirely abandoned in favor of a full-blown sci-fi adventure, more akin to something like Guardians of the Galaxy than to the original Predator movie. In fact, this is the first film in the series not to be rated R. It's not scary, or honestly even very intense, and in the absence of any human characters, since all the human actors in this portray non-human androids called synthetics, it also lacks the series' sort of typical violence and gore. In fact, perhaps even more shockingly, Badlands actually has less profanity than even animated films like Across the Spider-Verse or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. As a parent, I actually wouldn't have any concerns about watching this with my two 10-year-old twin boys. Of course, whether a Predator movie should be made accessible to 10-year-old boys is still debatable to me. Unfortunately, where this film falters, at least to me, is in its indecisive tone. Now, to be clear, I think Elle Fanning is an excellent actress, and she actually portrays two different synthetic characters in this film, including a surprisingly convincing villain. So the fault may lie more with the character and the writing than it does with the actress, but her primary character, a synthetic named Thea, almost single-handedly derails this entire film. Her bubbly personality and attempts at goofy comedy are obviously intended to be endearing, but instead just come across as almost agonizingly grating and obnoxious. I mean, we're talking about Jar Jar Binks level of annoyance. And she's also joined by a cute alien sidekick that is clearly trying to conjure some of that bankable Baby Yoda magic. And call me grumpy, but it's just a bit too much cute and cuddly that I want in a Predator movie. When the film plays the action and the drama with a degree of seriousness or at least weight, centered on the Predator himself, I do think it works really well. The action's cool. I think he's an interesting hero, but sort of the unrelenting intrusion of kid-friendly silliness just prevents this story from maintaining any sort of momentum. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, really not a whole lot. For language, like I said, there's really just one use of a minor profanity, beginning with the letter S. For violence, there is some violence, but again, there's no human characters in this film. So there are aliens that are like wounded and killed and spill various colors of alien blood. And many like synthetic androids are also killed in various ways, whether hacked apart or having holes burnt in their chests or like their heads crushed, but without any blood or gore. And for sexuality, there's nothing in this movie for that. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, I think Predator Badlands offers some simple themes and messages that I do think Christians can affirm. The predator species in this is defined by like strength and power, and it is sort of the warrior prowess of the individual that like, ultimately proves their worth to the community. And Deck, who is this film's like alien protagonist, is definitely a skilled warrior, but he's like a mere runt by the standards of his species and just driven to prove his strength. But his values are challenged by meeting and like reluctantly teaming up with Thea, which again is Elle Fanning's character, kind of questioning her desire to be allies. He says, "You could survive alone," to which she responds, "Of course I could survive alone, but who would want to survive alone?" And later she tells Deck sort of about the wolf packs on Earth and how the alpha demonstrates strength not by being the most successful killer, but by protecting the pack. And although Deck is initially unconvinced, he slowly comes around to seeing that strength involves more than just the ability to kill. And that simple message that true strength is not found in like, individualism, but in the context of community, echoes a biblical worldview, because in scripture it is written like in Proverbs 27, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another," or in like Ecclesiastes 4, where it says, "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up." And I even think Christians can probably draw parallels just to like Paul's writing about the unity of the church body. So, in the end, I had somewhat mixed feelings on this one. Predator Badlands is goofy, fun, and I think surprisingly wholesome, which are not words usually, associated with this franchise. And perhaps my main issue, besides just Elle Fanning's character, is that I think this probably is an enjoyable, like, sci-fi adventure. It's just not a particularly good Predators movie. Abandoning, like, the intimate and, like, stripped-down approach that I thought made Prey such a success is a bold decision, and I just don't think it entirely works, even if it does provide enough sort of crowd-pleasing, popcorn-munching entertainment to satisfy, general audiences. In the end, I think demystifying the iconic sort of cinematic villain may prove ill-advised for the franchise going forward, because I'm just not sure this character will ever be kind of convincingly intimidating again. But at least for one film, Predator's like unexpected heroic turn is an enjoyable enough ride. But hey, I would love to hear what you guys think if you're a big fan of the franchise or you finally find this as an entry point to get into it. Don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation on it. If you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a collider. Got lots of other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through all for Christ.